please do let's use the chat facility. As is the custom with virtual meetings, we're beginning to get the hang of this. I'm going to hand over to Alexa Coates, Head of Democratic Services, Committee Services, who will be doing a roll call. So could you keep your mics and cameras on for the roll call, please? And then as soon as you've said that you're here at the meeting, could you at least turn the microphone off so there's no audio interference? If your Wi-Fi is a little bit shaky, you might find that turning off the camera when you're not speaking helps with the broadband width. But certainly if everyone could turn off. Hang on just a second, Councillor James, I can see a message. If everyone could turn off their mics, that would be really helpful. I see a message that Councillor Hicks has the wrong link. I don't know if we can do something about that quickly. Is that what you wanted to say, Councillor James?
No, I didn't want to say anything.
Okay, fine. So I saw that you come on your mic. Could someone send Councillor Hicks the correct link, please? Alexa's just done that. Excellent. So we'll start the meeting, and Alexa, I'm going to hand over to you for the roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Jane McCoy.
Present. Councillor Jane McCoy.
Councillor Manuel Abelan.
Present.
Councillor Jenny Batt.
Present.
Councillor Tim Crawley.
Present.
Councillor Tom Drummond.
Present. Present.
Councillor Tim Foster.
Present.
Councillor Neil Garrett.
Hello, I'm present.
Councillor Sunita Gordon.
Present.
Councillor Amy Haldane.
Present.
Councillor David Hicks. Councillor Marion James.
Present.
Councillor Steve Pennock.
Present.
Councillor Holly Ramsey.
Hi, present.
Councillor Morsaki.
Hi, present.
And can I just check, Chair, if we got Councillor David Hicks? That's the roll call completed.
I know David does want to join the meeting, Alexa. I spoke to him about 7:20, so
that's fine, Councillor Crowley. As soon as he joins, I'll make a point of saying it so it's recorded, and that's absolutely not a problem. I know that sometimes it's not always easy to join with the links. So thank you, Alexa, and assuming that Councillor Hicks joins us, there he is. So perhaps you'd like to, as we haven't started yet, Alexa, give him a second to connect the audio, and then you can invite him to speak.
Thank you. Councillor David Hicks, can you confirm you're present?
You need to unmute, David.
Can you hear me now?
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, we can, loud and clear. That means that everyone is present this evening, which is excellent. Thank you all, which means that there are no apologies for absence. Can I just show, by a show of hands, are there any declarations of interest? I'm going to take silence as not needing to declare an interest, but I do need to ask the question. And no one is indicating. So if everyone could now mute, please, that would be really helpful. It's up to you if you want to keep the camera on or not, although obviously when you're speaking, it would be better to have the camera on. But if everyone could mute, that will help with the audio. I don't have any indications of any urgent business, so we'll move to item 5, the minutes of the meeting on the 30th of March. Can I approve the minutes as a correct record of the meeting? Some nods, thumbs up would be absolutely fine. Yeah, I'm getting several thumbs up and nods, so that's approved. Thank you very much. And that brings us straight to item 6, which is update on the Council's response to the COVID-19 threat. And I'm going to hand over to Helen Bailey, the Chief Executive, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. This is a long and relatively comprehensive report because I think we wanted to put on the record the various activities undertaken by the Council during the last 3 months. So what this report does is to take you through the public health situation as it was at the time of drafting, which is slightly out of date, but I know the Director of Public Health is on the call and could answer any questions on that. To tell you a little bit about the local context in which we've been operating, to situate that in some of the national guidance that we have been implementing, and then to take you through the work streams through which the Council has been operating: health and social care, education, communications, workforce, excess death, the community hub, housing and business support. And just to set out the activities that have been undertaken under all of those work streams over the first period during which we've been operating in this way. And I suppose it's, as I say, that there's an awful lot of ground covered in this report, and I'm going to ask Sam Barker, who put the report together, to say a word or two and give us some facts and figures from the work that he has done that sits behind this. But before I do that, I would also like just to pay tribute to the staff of the Council and to thank councillors for their support. We've had during this period 90% of our staff working from home. We have managed to maintain the vast majority of our basic services pretty much uninterrupted, so waste collection, street sweeping, that sort of thing, and managed to continue and to deliver the really important services in this crisis, particularly those for adults and children's services, and providing support to our colleagues in the NHS with their caring work and with our own. So it has been a very busy time, and a time during which the attention of the Council has had to switch. Officers of the Council has had to switch from the sort of normal business as usual to a range of new functions. We're increasingly now, as I speak to you this evening, trying to get back to business as usual, but still operating in these times of pandemic. So next week we'll see businesses starting to open, we believe. We haven't had the final announcement from government yet on our high streets, and a greater expectation from our residents that we will be able to offer the usual support that we are able to offer our communities. So we're also in a time of transition as we put this report in front of you. I'm not going to say very much, partly because there is so very much in the report, but I'm very happy as our officer colleagues to take questions on the report and to just recommend to you the recommendations on the report, and I will ask Richard Simpson, when Sam has said a few words, to talk to you about the Discretionary Business Grant Fund, which is the subject of a specific recommendation. Yes, and I think the rest of them are self-explanatory. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Helen. And before I bring in other officers, can I say, I know I speak on behalf of every single councillor who's present this evening, how very grateful we are for the way that Sutton Council and all its staff have stepped up. It's been an absolutely extraordinary response, and I think this report actually shows the breadth, the sheer scale of the work that's been involved. As you say, it's not getting any easier as we start to return to, I wouldn't say business as usual, but certainly we start to open up other services. We still have to carry on providing the crisis services that we have been providing so well up until now. And so life certainly doesn't get any easier, it gets a lot more complicated. But I just wanted to put on record our thanks to staff. They've coped with remote working, home working extraordinarily well. As you say, at times there are 90% of our staff working from home, and that presents its challenges. Not everyone is set up to work comfortably from home. And as human beings, as colleagues, it is better and easier sometimes to work in the same room and to have that contact with colleagues. So it's not easy. But what I'd particularly like to thank staff for is their flexibility in their redeployment. Very many members of staff have agreed that in the midst of a global pandemic, some of the services could be put on hold while they focus on what I would call the frontline crisis services. And staff have been incredibly flexible, willing to do new things, work in different ways. And the sheer amount of work that's been involved has been absolutely staggering. I know the times when I'm on my emails late in the evening or at weekends and I see officers replying to me, makes me feel very guilty. But also it's just shows how hard people are working, very long hours. Quite often people say to me that they're not quite sure what every week it is because every day feels the same. There's a huge amount of work going on, and as I say, we are very, very grateful to you all. And Helen, if you could take back our grateful thanks, we'd Right, that'd be much appreciated. I can't single out any one part of the council, but I do think this report, which I intend to share widely, I think it's important our residents understand how the council has stepped up in such a terrible crisis, the work that we're still doing and we intend to do for some time to come. So very grateful to you all, and I hope you'll let everyone know our strong feelings on this matter, and I'm sure all other councillors will endorse what I've just said. Sam, do you want to come in to add to the report?
I'll just add a couple of things briefly. I think the other piece to just draw out is the report covers the work that the council's done in response and the impact on council services, but it's been very much done in partnership. So that's partnership with our voluntary sector and community sector colleagues who have worked tirelessly to support residents to make sure that they get the services that they need during this time. Lots of partnership working with the CCG as well in terms of our response. Lots of partnership working with our providers as well, whether that's the care sector and the work we've done with care homes, and that's outlined in the report itself. And then the last bit that's just worth mentioning is the effort that's been put in by volunteers. So at the start of this, the volunteer centre were inundated with offers of Sutton residents offering to volunteer and help out. I think last time I spoke to them, they were up over 2,000 offers of people coming to them and saying they want to help, they want to make sure that people in our communities are supported. And it's that joint effort, so the council with our partners and volunteers, that has very much meant that everything in this report can be delivered. And then the last thing I will mention, at the end of the report, it starts to talk about the transition to recovery and some principles that the council is using, which will be built on over the coming weeks. In terms of how we are going to make sure our residents, our communities and our businesses continue to be supported, and also thinking about our workforce as well and how we're going to support them going forward.
That's really helpful, Sam. Thank you for that. Councillors are coming in with various questions and things they'd like to raise. I think it would be helpful if Mr. Simpson came in at this point as the Strategic Director for Resources to give us an update on the discretionary grants for small businesses. I know that there are some councillors that have some questions about that. So I think, Richard, it'd be good if you could give us an update on where we are on this, and then I'll open up to councillors for questions.
Thank you, Leader. So, the report itself refers, so I think it's worth setting out that there's been two schemes, just to provide clarity. The report in paragraph 6.61 set out at the time of writing the report how far we'd progressed on getting out grants to businesses from the first scheme. So the government announced a scheme early on in the crisis, which was for us to administer. And at the time of writing this report, we got out 1,483 grants to smaller businesses out of a total of about 1,800. We're now at about 1,700, 1,720. So we're at about 95% of getting those grants out. The way we got those grants out was quite tightly defined. So that was to those businesses who received small business rate relief or had rateable values up to £51,000 for if they're in the retail, leisure or hospitality sector. So we've spent the last 6 to 8 weeks trying to get that money out as quickly as possible. In the last month, the government announced a further scheme, which is a discretionary scheme, and our allocation is 5% of the allocation for the original more mandatory scheme. So the allocation for Sutton is just over 1.2 million. The last guidance document for that scheme came out on the 22nd of May. And since then, we've been working with other South West London boroughs and checking in with other boroughs as well to kind of align ours as much as possible, but also to fit in with the government's guidance around the scheme. So the Appendix B to this report sets out the proposed scheme for Sutton. It is a similar scheme to other London boroughs because we're operating within kind of parameters set within the government guidance. I'm aware from speaking to other South West London boroughs, Croydon's scheme went live last week, Richmond and Wandsworth at the end of last week, Kingston's scheme went live today, Merton's scheme is planned to go live on Wednesday. Given we had this committee tonight, we took the decision to make the decision in an open, transparent way on our scheme, so it came to committee tonight. If we weren't making it through this committee, we would have made it under urgency procedures, but with kind of the timing of when the team had done all the work, drawn up the guidance, worked with the IT team to get the website and forms ready, it kind of fitted in with the timing of this committee. That's why it's here. That's why it's here tonight. The timing will be, we've gone proposing a scheme where there's a deadline, rather than, I know some other boroughs have gone for a first come, first serve basis. So we've got a deadline which will be the 23rd of June. So, we're hoping for all member support in terms of making sure businesses who've contacted you know about the scheme and therefore can apply in good time. I suppose the one issue around the scheme is it's difficult to predict the level of demand. I'm aware from one South West London borough on day one they had 400 applications, and another South West London borough on day one had 5 applications. So it's difficult to predict the level of activity, but I suppose giving a reasonable time for people to come back hopefully allows that to happen. So one final point, we're obviously asking for, it's not just tell us your business name and we get you out the money as quickly as possible. We have to assess a few things during the process. So we have to assess the level of income reduction during the COVID period, and also whether the business has ongoing premises costs. So we are asking for some information, but we would ask businesses to contact us if they have any issues with that, which we don't want to make this over bureaucratic, but we also have to have a fair and transparent process, I suppose, where we can compare as much as possible the impacts on business, because at this point we don't know, as I said, the level of demand. Therefore we may have to be taking decisions on those that we think need the money the most. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. And you said the deadline was the 23rd. I didn't catch when the system's actually going live. I assume it's in the next few days.
Should go live tomorrow, Leader.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I know Councillor Ramsey's already contacted me. She'd like to come in, but Councillor James came in first. So we'll take Councillor James's comment, and then I'll move to Councillor Ramsey and then Councillor McCoy.
Thank you, Chair. I haven't got a question as such, but I just wanted to make a comment. So when I was reading through this report, I obviously was aware of quite a lot of it. But when I saw it all together, I mean, I was absolutely amazed. I mean, truly amazed at the amount of work that people have been doing. And I was particularly impressed the fact that council staff and all our partners, how quickly they adapted to new ways of working and implementing new services. And I know that many people have worked additional hours, additional days, they've worked weekends. And I think, we really do need to be very, very proud of all that's been achieved. But I just wanted to highlight a couple of things as well. So the section about care homes, just to really stress that the money from the government that we've received for care homes, so 75% of that goes directly to care homes. So I don't want anyone to think it's staying with the council. And also, in addition to receiving that money, there was some work that had to be done. And we had to produce a care home plan. It had to be produced in consultation with partners, and it had to be done in a very short space of time. And again, because of our good partnership working in the past, we were able to meet that deadline. And I would just encourage everybody, if you've not read that care home plan, it is on the website, then please do so, because you will see how much work and support has been given to the care homes in Sutton. And just to say, that in Sutton, we are the second highest borough for the number of care homes that we have. You know, it's 79 in total. And then just a little bit about the voluntary sector, because obviously we couldn't have got through this crisis without our partners in the voluntary sector. But it's been really refreshing to see how council and voluntary sector staff have sort of like swapped roles at times. And I know that they have really appreciated how the council has worked with them as equal partners. And I know that the additional funding that the council was able to give to the sector, particularly to Age UK Sutton and to the Volunteer Centre, that it allowed them to move very, very swiftly. So I'd just like to end by saying that I am immensely proud of all that we have done, and I hope that everybody sitting around this table tonight is as proud too. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor James, and thank you for making those powerful points. I know that when we're speaking to residents and we explain that 70% of our budget goes on social services, adults and children, they're quite surprised, because unless you have a relative who has benefited from some of these services, it's quite difficult to understand. And I think certainly with the crisis, people will have a better understanding of just how much work is involved and the lives of some vulnerable people living in our borough and how important it is that we support them. Councillor Ramsey, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Chair. And can I also echo Councillor James's comments about how much work has been done during this time, but particularly on Appendix B, the discretionary funds, I have quite a few questions actually. Firstly, after tonight, is this going to go live tomorrow? And the deadline is the 23rd of June. Do we know how long roughly it's then going to take for businesses to actually receive the grant? Because it has been quite a long time so far that a lot of businesses have had to go without any income. Is there, thirdly, sorry, lots of questions, is there a way we can make the application form simpler? Because it's actually quite onerous and quite complicated. And I have seen some other boroughs' application forms, and it doesn't seem as complicated as ours. And then finally, some of the businesses, their landlord is the council. So is there a conflict of interest if they're having to give some of this confidential business information?
Thank you for that, Councillor Ramsey. I think they're all good questions. Before I ask Mr Simpson to reply, it seems sensible, rather than jumping all over the place on the paper, to bring in anyone else that has any questions on this specific item. I know you want to come in on walking and cycling, Councillor Garrett, which is important, but I think you'll agree it's best if we deal with this item as one and then move on to others. Councillor McCoy, I don't know if you want to come in on this particular issue. If not, Councillor McCoy, if you wanted to come in now on this particular issue, otherwise I'll see if anyone else has any particular questions on this item. No? Does anyone, any other councillors have any questions specifically on this item so we can do them all in one go? I can't see anyone else indicating, so Mr Simpson, over to you.
Thanks, Leader. So, yes, was the answer to the first question. We expect the form to go live tomorrow, so people can start applying from tomorrow. The deadline, the 23rd of June. I suppose we'll be looking at applications as they come in. The amount of work in terms of at the end of the process will depend on the number of applications to some degree. From our experience in getting the first lot of business grants out, so after the 23rd of June, I think we'd want to make pretty swift decisions in the following week, and then the money would follow the following week to that. So I'd hope the money would be out within 2 weeks of the 23rd of June. If we have less applications than the money we've got, clearly we could get the money out even quicker. But I would, in terms of managing expectations, I would say 2 weeks from the 23rd of June. I mean, the information we've asked, I'm happy to take feedback on if any of the questions are felt to be not required. The information we've asked for is to help us make a fair and transparent decision, and some of it to assess against the criteria we need in terms of the size of the business, and also to check that they haven't received money from other sources. So to check their eligibility, really, that's why we're asking these questions. we're, you know, if businesses don't have certain information, please, we're putting out on the press release and all the information, get in contact with the Opportunity Sutton team. We'll be there to help and support. It's in our interest to get as many businesses applying as possible. So we're not trying to preclude, but I understand a form of this nature could be challenging for people when they've got other priorities as well. But we're trying to ask for information that we need, not for the sake of it. The last point, in terms of conflict, I'm not sure there is. I mean, the information we're asking for, if there are tenants, the ongoing premises cost will be known to us because they'll be paying us anyway. The loss of income, well, I mean, lots of those people would have been talking to us already about loss of income. I mean, or to enable us to make the decision, we need to see evidence of that alongside other businesses. I mean, the team who will be administering that aren't the team who they have a relationship with in terms of managing the landlord-tenant relationship. So it is a completely different team in the council, but we do need that information to allow us to make a decision.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. And Councillor Ramsey, I was interested to hear that you've seen forms from other boroughs. If you'd like to forward them on to Mr. Simpson, he might find it helpful just to see the way that other authorities are approaching this. Did you want to come back in on this, Councillor Ramsey?
Yes, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to forward those on, although I'm conscious that we probably should just get this out ASAP to businesses. So I don't want to delay. If it can go live tomorrow, then I don't want to kind of cause any issues that would delay it. But hopefully some businesses, you know, who do really need this grant, they won't be penalised if there's some questions that they're unable to answer. And that's it from me.
That's fine. Thank you for that. Councillor McCoy, you wanted to come in on this subject?
Yes, please. Just wanted to clarify. I think Councillor Ramsey is referring to an application form, but the application form isn't part of the document. In the appendix, it just says all businesses that wish to apply for the grant must complete an application form, and you'll need the following information on hand to complete the application. Now, I believe that information that's required is what's set out in the government guidance so councils can actually check and confirm that they're making a genuine business, making a genuine claim. I know with a number of cases where businesses have been trying for loans and things like that, actually it might be worthwhile them contacting their accountants because they have all the information to hand. That's been quite helpful. So if any businesses are having issues, to contact their accountants. But I believe that the actual form is going to be quite straightforward. That's just have this on hand because they're part of the information you're going to have to submit in accordance with the government guidance. In terms of getting it out quickly, I'm really pleased that Opportunity Sutton have been involved in sort of helping think about what businesses are going to be impacted and need this help. But I think it's worth noting that as far as expectations were concerned, the government announced this scheme. We were pleased about it. We were thinking about it, but the actual guidance for it took about 2 weeks to come out. So we couldn't actually develop a scheme as a council until we got the details of that guidelines. So it was a bit, it sort of raised everyone's expectations. Yet we had 2 weeks before we could even start drafting the full scheme. But yes, we've been fantastic at getting the other grants out, and I'm very confident that because we've been doing a lot of work contacting businesses through the Opportunity Sutton team, through all the various networks, with the help of the business improvement districts, that we'll get this out as quickly as possible. But importantly, to actually promote it so that businesses that didn't qualify for the other grant schemes are aware that they can try for this one. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Councillor McCoy. And as we know, our borough is made up of a few large companies, but mostly it's small and micro businesses. So the more support we can give to these businesses, the better. I do think credit due that the government is making every effort to ensure that businesses do get some support in this crisis. Clearly, we know that when we eventually start to come out of the health pandemic, we are clearly entering an economic downturn, if not a full global recession. So any support that we can give to our businesses, the better as far as everyone is concerned. And speed is of the essence, but we also have to do it fairly and we have to do it correctly. I do know of some boroughs that have been very quick off the mark and have actually made quite a few mistakes and have had to retract and change things, which makes life difficult for everyone. Councillor Garrett, you wanted to come in on walking and cycling.
Yes, thank you very much. So recommendation 2.4, which refers to paragraphs 517 and 519. I support the plan or the recommendation. My concern, which I expressed to officers, I think it would have been Tuesday last week, when I got on my bike and went for a little ride around and looked at, for example, the scheme in Sutton, is that for reasons that I'm sure you don't want me to go into in this meeting, but I'm happy to if you like, I think that scheme has actually made it less safe for cyclists, primarily because it's reduced a 2-lane road where motorists can easily get by into a 1-lane road where they can't. And so I always feel very nervous as a cyclist when I'm put into conflict with potentially fast-moving motor traffic. I know in theory that's a 30-mile-an-hour road, but we all know that it is a common area for speeding, and it makes it frankly quite an unpleasant place to cycle. And the fact that it's the bit that goes right in front of the council offices is quite ironic. And so my concern is that while people are trying to sort of put these schemes together quite quickly, it's actually possible to do something with good intention, and in the process makes the very road users that we're hoping to help worse off. And so I wanted to add an amendment to the recommendation. So keep the recommendation 2.4 as it is, but change the final full stop to a comma and add where each proposed scheme's benefit is made clear during the design stage and delivered in practice. Because I think it is important that we have more than just good intentions, that we actually have good results as well.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. Could you just repeat that again slowly so that Alexa Coates can make a note?
I can, yes, sorry, I gabbled that a bit. So recommendation 2.4, staying the same as it is up to the end, changing the full stop at the end after 517 into a comma, and then where each proposed scheme's benefit is made clear during the design stage and delivered in practice, full stop. So effectively it's committing us not just to go through a process, but to make sure that process is delivering something useful for our residents.
No, I can understand that. If you wouldn't mind popping it up on the chat as well, that might help committee services just to get the wording right. That'd be really helpful. Thank you. Councillor Abelan, I think you want to come in on this specific item, and also Councillor McCoy. Councillor Abelan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a few to come back on Councillor Garrett's comment. I think there's been the first 9 measures as we that have been announced. There's a mixture. Some of them are for walking, and we wanted to make sure that we want to make sure that these are in place before businesses reopen. And then there was a couple which were more aimed at cycling, but our priority first was social distancing in terms of pedestrians around town centres. That's also why we're introducing, by the end of this week, we should have 5 school streets, because we wanted to make sure that town centres and schools were prioritised on this scheme. In terms of the Sutton town centre measures, I've seen them myself, and I expressed concerns to officers as well. I was promised water barriers to go instead of cones, because I was worried that cones were not of good enough quality. So I was a bit disappointed by that, and I'm told that there's a delay of 2-3 weeks to get them. However, on a positive note, officers were quite accommodating, and we went on a bike ride literally the day after I raised those concerns to see how, even though those measures were aimed at pedestrians, how we can make some tweaks to make sure that they're safer for cyclists. And I completely accept and I agree with you on the point that those measures were not good for cycling. So hopefully you'll see some changes in the next few days that will be an upgrade from what we've seen so far. So I mean, I can say more on this. I've been in quite a lot of discussions directly with Andrew Gilligan at the DFT, who's leading on this at the government, or the Commissioner for Cycling and the Deputy Mayor for Transport. So, but I won't bore everyone with the details if there's not more questions or issues.
Thank you, Councillor Aberlin. And I will ask Mr. Latham if he has anything to add. But if Councillor Aberlin, you could look at the amendment that Councillor Garrett is suggesting, which he's helpfully put on the chat, and let us know if you're happy with it. Mr. Latham, did you want to add anything?
Really, just, Chair, to say that Councillor Garrett's quite right. And thank you very much, Councillor Garrett, for your feedback last week. You've heard that Councillor Aberlin also provided feedback, and I think the message I would give, Chair, is that we implemented these, as all members are aware, without consultation with ward councillors or other members for that matter. But we welcome the feedback, because I think the need to prove the concept, if I can use that term, is understood. So that would be my observation, and I think that's where the feedback from members and other interested parties like Get Sutton Cycling is very useful indeed. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor McCoy's explained that she wanted to make a point on a different point, so I suggest we move down the list then. Councillor Aberlin, do you want to come back in?
Yes, just to say that I mean, I think the recommendation, the added words that Councillor Garrett suggested seem fine to me. And just wanted to very quickly, I thought it would be important to clarify that the bids that have gone in, for roughly around £2 million, we still haven't received confirmation that we have been successful in getting that amount of funding. So we should find out in the next week. And I hope that members will understand that it's quite a fast-paced, moving project, and we're asking our officers to turn things around quite rapidly. So officers will keep members as informed as they can, but it is quite a fast-moving project.
That's fine, and a very good cause. So I've got Councillor Batt, then Councillor Drummond, then Councillor McCoy. Councillor Batt.
Thank you, Chair. Just some comments, really. I wanted to echo Councillor James's comments about how much work has been done in this response. But I'd particularly like to sort of say thank you to our schools, to the council officers, Cognitive staff, our social care colleagues, and our voluntary sector partners for their incredible partnership work in responding to this crisis. This has been one of the most challenging issues to ever face our education system. And it's been clear to see the strong partnership that already exists in this borough has enabled schools to respond effectively to this crisis, to support all children and young people and their families, be that caring for vulnerable children and children with additional needs and children of key workers in school, or also providing a comprehensive online education to pupils. As a parent of 3 school-age pupils myself, who all attend secondary and primary schools in the borough, I've seen firsthand how hard they've worked, the dedication, creative ways in which schools, teachers and support staff have supported children and young people to adapt to what for many has been a completely new world. And this is not only about their education, it's also about their physical and mental well-being. And I know how hard many parents have found this over the last few months. I can assure you homeschooling is far harder than I ever thought it would be. And my children are very keen to get back to school. They miss it, they miss their teachers and their friends. I've been really pleased to see all the safeguarding work that's been doing for our vulnerable children, our children with special educational needs and disabilities. It's been amazing to see Cognitive that have reached out to all families with children with an EHCP. I think it's also important that we acknowledge our children and young people as well and the situation they've faced, something that none of us have ever had to face before. It's been particularly difficult as well for those children who are at key transition points and were due to sit exams this year. And there's been a lot of work done, however, we're still in the midst of this crisis, and for many children, things have changed a lot and they're going to need a lot of support going forward. And I'm sure that this partnership working will be able to provide that. And if any members would like to see updates on education, please sign up to the Education Bulletin, which sort of gives you a really good overview of all the work that's going on at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Batt. And I know there are other councillors here this evening who are parents of school-aged children who will very much appreciate your comments on how difficult homeschooling is. The primary school where I'm a governor was really interested to see an email from one of the parents who's a secondary school teacher saying, I never realised how difficult primary school education is. And when it's your own children, it must be even more difficult. So yeah, hats off to our parents, but also to our wonderful teachers and teaching staff who are doing such a great job. And as you say, under quite difficult circumstances, not just from an educational point of view, but also from a mental health and emotional resilience point of view. So everyone is working very hard, and hopefully we'll be able to give the support to those youngsters who sadly have been struggling more than others during this crisis and will find it difficult to keep up with their peers. We need to think about what extra support we can give them. Councillor Drummond.
Thank you, Chair. It goes without saying I echo a lot of the sentiments that have been said today about everyone that's contributed and helped out during this difficult time. Apologies if this has been covered, because I've dropped out 2 or 3 times and had to come back in again. So apologies if it has been covered. It's just a quick question on recommendation 2.3, which is regarding the care homes and the note on the mechanism for administration for the additional care market funding. So if I go to 6.13, which you're referencing, I get the 75-25%, but am I noting a plan that's still in development? Because that's how it reads. The council and its partners are in process of developing a plan. So I'm wondering if I'm noting that plan or if it's still in development, so therefore I can't note it. And obviously it is still in development. So do we have a timescale, and do we know when it will be kind of up and running? Thank you.
Ruth, shall I come in and answer that?
That would be helpful, Councillor James. Thank you.
So Councillor Drummond, you did miss a little bit when you dropped out, because one of the things that I was saying is that the care home plan has been submitted, and I was urging everybody to go onto the website and read it, because you will see the amount of work that's been done to support our care homes. And one of the things that I was saying is we are the second borough with the largest number of care homes. We have 79. We had a very short time scale to complete the care home plan, but because of the good relationship that we have with our partners, because we did have to consult with them, I think the officers did a tremendous job. So yeah, it's been submitted. It's there on the website, all ready for you to read.
Thank you for that. I'm assuming that's okay, Councillor Drummond. I know you dropped out. Obviously, the report was written before the care plan was submitted. Yep. That's why there's that slight time lag.
Yeah, understood. So I'll read it tonight. A bit of bedtime reading for me. Thank you very much.
That's fine. Councillor McCoy, you want to come in on a different issue, and then Councillor Crowley.
Thanks. Well, first of all, just to save me coming back in a couple of times, I'll combine my own thanks and recognition of the staff for all the work they're doing. I just particularly want to mention, because it obviously comes under my remit particularly, the customer services team, who moved very rapidly to working largely from home and working out of hours, evenings and weekends, and have managed magnificently during this time. They've also helped with the organisation of the hub and been redeployed and done things there. And I've had some really fantastic stories from residents about just how kind and caring they've been, how they've listened to them with their problems, and they realise that actually some people just want someone to talk to in these times. So fantastic work for them. Also Encompass, who have been under significant pressure because of having to deal with issues of rough sleeping, and we've seen that the numbers of, those numbers have gone up that we've needed to deal with, from a normal amount of around, maximum of 10 rough sleepers. Now we've got more people presenting as at risk of rough sleeping, so we're up to about over 70 now, which have all had to be accommodated. We're seeing people facing risk of homelessness through not being able to afford their rent in the private sector, and then just general other issues. The arising ex-offenders having to be, or ex-prisoners, sorry, having to be housed. So there's been a lot of pressure on Encompass, but again, they've risen to the challenge. They've been as helpful as they can, been working all the hours. So thanks to them. And then finally, the Business Support Revenue and Benefits team. Again, they've been doing all they can to get funds out to the right people, to administer all the business schemes and supporting everyone. But that brings me on to my question and points. I was really shocked to see the increase in people applying for universal credit. And while the government's furloughing scheme has managed to make sure that many people retain their jobs that otherwise might be facing redundancy, going forward, I think we can expect to see increased redundancies and therefore more people having to claim universal credit. And just generally, more people facing poverty, which is going to become an issue. So I noticed that the council has been applying the various schemes, the Hardship Fund, which reduces council tax that people have to pay. But I did notice that the Hardship Fund that covers in 6.39, clearly it hasn't all been spent yet at the time of writing. So I wonder what the plans are to deal with the rest of that fund. So what's the question is, what is the plan to spend the remainder of the Hardship Fund, please?
Thank you, Councillor McCoy. I'll bring in Mr. Simpson to reply.
Thanks, Leader. So the Hardship Fund applies £150 to working age adult council tax bills where they already qualify for the council tax reduction scheme. So the amount in the report really relates to those who were already qualifying for that at the start of the year. So there's initial allocation that went to all those who are already qualifying. As Councillor McCoy said, the likely numbers are going to go up during the year. And that Hardship Fund has to apply to anyone who qualifies for the scheme during the whole of the financial year. So I think, again, as Councillor McCoy said, the likelihood is that demand will increase, particularly as the furlough scheme ends over the summer. So at this point, I think we're monitoring the additional spend related to that. So we don't spend it on something else and have to spend it on the initial intention of the Hardship Fund. I think by the kind of end of the summer, we'll have a good idea of whether we could use some of that money in a more targeted way, rather than just in that uniform way. What we've also done, because we had a Hardship Fund, a Sutton Hardship Fund pre this of about £50,000, we've added that to the Crisis Loan Fund to kind of double the amount in the Crisis Loan Fund. So there's more money available to use in partnership with Encompass to support those with the purchase of white goods and those kind of responses. We've also got the discretionary housing, the DHP funds. They went up for this financial year as well. So we're working very closely with Sutton Housing Partnership and Encompass to ensure we use that discretionary housing payments effectively in terms of trying to prevent homelessness and trying to support people who are in particular difficulty at this point. So on the Hardship Fund, I think it is a watching brief to see how much more is used as a result of more residents qualifying for the council tax reduction scheme. But certainly there'll be an opportunity to think about targeting the remaining funds more effectively, either joining it up with the DHP money, joining it up with the crisis loans, or doing something completely different if we see there's a gap in terms of our support over the next few months.
Thanks very much, Richard. Actually, that also reminds me, the council's been giving council tax payment holidays as well in key cases. I just wondered what the council tax arrears is looking like at the moment. Have you seen increases and where that might go?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because it's a key potential reduction in income for councils, both council tax and business rates. I would say it's really hard to tell at this point, because we offered deferrals from April to January to a June to March timescale. We may get a better idea after June, because then everyone should be paying in June. We've had kind of natural deferrals for a couple of months. Our income for 2 months is about £1.5 million down, Councillor McCoy. it's hard to say at this point how many of those are completely because of deferrals, and how many are people potentially getting into arrears. We do plan to issue a letter to those who haven't been in touch at all, so not to ask for a deferral and not change circumstances on council tax reduction scheme, just to offer our support in terms of opening communication channels, because obviously the worst thing is if someone to kind of potentially bury their head in the sand and not think about the ways they could structure those payments, or potentially they qualify from support from one of those funds I mentioned. So I think we'll have a better idea at the end of June. In terms of those qualifying for council tax reduction scheme, at the start of the year, the budget was about 11.5 million. Based on those who qualify now, the year-end spend would be about 12.1. So that's already 600k, and that's the cost to the council of the increase in demand for that scheme. Clearly, you'd expect that to go further up during the rest of the year, but that kind of depends on economic circumstances and the next few months. It'd be hard to predict that, but we're expecting that number to go up. So that's separate from the Hardship Fund, but it's linked in the way that those who qualify then get the £150 as well from the government-funded scheme.
Can I just say I'm delighted you're taking such a proactive approach at trying to contact people, because one of the things that I was thinking about when I asked the question was that people falling into arrears is an indication about their suffering poverty and issues like that. So being proactive and trying to avoid that in the first place is good, but it will be, I think, a good indication going forward of what our residents are facing on the ground. Thank you.
I think that's right, Councillor McCoy, and I think, Mr Simpson, we are adopting the right approach. It's going to be a long haul. I've seen the Bank of England talking about the fact that this is going to be the worst economic recession in recorded history, and I've heard Professor Tony Travers predicting unemployment in London between 10 and 15%. So things are going to get really tough, and whatever support we can provide for our residents obviously is a good thing. I've got Councillor Crowley and then Councillor Garrett, and then I suggest we move to the recommendations. Councillor Crowley.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for everybody's comments about the council and how well they've coped in the situation. I'd like to echo that. I'd also like to echo the great work that's been done by our partner agencies, including the NHS and all the NHS agencies, and the work that the Director of Public Health has been doing, and the updates we've been getting from Mr Chowdhury and also from our Chief Executive over the last 3 months. I'd like, but before I go on to my substantive point, I'd like to just prick a few things that have just been said here, misnomers that I think need to be corrected, as this is a recorded meeting. It was said that people are facing homelessness for not paying their rent at present. The government at the moment have done a scheme whereby nobody is allowed to be made homeless for not paying their rent, and we'll see if that's going to be extended. That is until at least the end of June. I do understand that the more that runs down the track, then people are going to get more and more worried. So I would welcome some certainty from the government on that. The reason universal credit is going up so much is because universal credit rules were relaxed, and the way that more people can now apply for universal credit. And in fact, a lot more people are applying, especially those in the self-employed sector and in other areas. And a lot more people are getting a lot more money through universal credit than was otherwise the case. Mr Simpson talked about the furlough scheme ending in the summer. It's not, it's running till the end of October. So we have got a few more months to go there as well with regards to that. And I noticed also that Mr Simpson mentioned the potential for problems down the road. And this brings me on to my substantive point, which is to do with Appendix A, which is the financial gap that we're talking about in relation to monies that we are predicting or guesstimating that we might be in trouble for going down the road. I'd like to remind everyone that the government has given us £10.6 million that is unring-fenced, and if you add that to the bounce back loan schemes, etc., I'm not going to go into all of that, but everything else that's the government has put in, that the amount of money, the one thing I think the government has done well throughout this crisis is to try and support the population financially and businesses financially. So I would like, if possible, and with your permission, Chair, to ask Mr Simpson whether or not we could have monthly updates on this dashboard, to ensure that we can see what the gaps are and how they're changing over time, and whether or not those gaps are coming down, or if in fact they're increasing. So it would be good to see if Mr. Simpson could answer that for me, and to see whether or not we would be able to have those monthly updates, or you know, every 6 weeks maybe, so that we know where we are. I take Mr. Simpson's point as well about the council tax, because if people are deferring, then we're not really going to know whether or not they're going to pay any money until after the end of June, I would imagine. And there's a lot of schemes out there at the moment for people to be able to get financial assistance. I'm not saying that. And also the other thing that the government did obviously was on homelessness. We've been given money for that, to make sure that people can be put into temporary accommodation. So this isn't the council putting that money in, this is the government that's putting that money in, and I'm glad to see that we're administering all the government schemes as well as we are. So I congratulate the council officers on that, and I congratulate the administration on taking that on board. And I do appreciate the leader's comments on what the government has done in relation to that, and I'd like to say thank you to everybody for all of their input. And if you could just answer that question, Mr. Simpson, on the dashboard, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
And as chair of the committee, Councillor Crowley, given that we are meeting monthly from now onwards, the Strategy and Resources, I see no problem in asking for a financial update at each of these meetings. We do have financial oversight of the council's expenditure and income, so I think that's absolutely fine. I'll have a conversation with Mr. Simpson and see the most appropriate way of providing it that isn't too resource intensive. But as I say, as we're meeting every month, I don't think that's a problem whatsoever. So that's a yes from me. I take your point, absolutely, about the support that's been given to individuals and to businesses. And as I said before, I absolutely recognise that this government has probably done something that doesn't sit comfortably with an ideology of a party that believes in small state. But given that we are in the throes of a global pandemic and about to enter a global recession, I have to recognise that the government has stepped up and has been ready to make those sorts of commitments. But I can't end that without just pointing out that, along with all other councils, while we recognise that we have received a certain amount of money, which has actually covered us up until the end of May, there's no doubt that going forward there is a financial need to cover the growing deficits of all councils across the country. And I'm sure you'll be aware, Councillor Crowley, the Local Government Association, which represents all parties and all councils across the country, has calculated that from the beginning of June for the next 6 months, we expect to have a financial gap of something around £6 billion. I don't think Sutton is a lot worse off than many places, but certainly we're not better off than many places. We're probably somewhere in the middle. And I was struck, as I'm sure you would have been, to receive the first magazine from the LGA just a few days ago, where they talk about the fact that councils need 4 times more funding than they've received so far. It's an article on page 4 and it sets it out quite clearly. One of the things I'm particularly pleased about in these difficult times is that parties are working so well together, both on London councils and the Local Government Association. All the parties are putting aside their political differences and doing what's right and what's best for the residents living in our areas, and I think that's really important. So the funding issue is very important, and I think you're right to highlight it, and we do need to see month on month as we go by exactly where we are and what sort of pressures it's going to be putting on the council, the services that it provides under normal circumstances, and the extra work that we're having to do as a result of the crisis. So thank you for raising that. Councillor Garrett, you wanted to come in and comment on virtual meetings?
Yes, although just on that previous point, I would add that the whole reason for keeping government finances in the black during normal times, even though there's always a good argument to spend more, is so that when there's a big downpour, rainy day like this, there is money to spend on all of these schemes we've been talking about. No, my point was sort of a meta point, really, about virtual meetings. It's been brought to my attention by some local residents and also by Tara O'Connor, the local democracy reporter, that it's possible for residents to watch these meetings live through this YouTube channel. I'm sure there are millions of people tuning into this right now around the world. But then the audio recording, which would normally go online, doesn't appear for a few days. But the video recording is made private and not visible immediately after the meeting. And so there's this strange anomaly whereby people can watch a meeting, and obviously in the case of a journalist, possibly want to rewatch it, but they can't actually then get the audio again until, in the case of this meeting, maybe Wednesday, let's say. So my request was just that we could leave these meetings up, even if not permanently, at least until the normal audio gets published.
Thank you for raising that. I wasn't aware of it. I don't know if there are technical reasons. If anyone's able to answer that immediately, if not, happy to take it away and find out the answer. I don't know if Helen Bailey or Alexa Coates knows the answer immediately. If not, as I say, we can find out. I wasn't aware that that was an issue.
Chair, we've just been in the early stages of virtual meetings, and I think we've had to work with our IT colleagues to make sure that what's recorded is appearing appropriately. But I won't pretend to be any more technical than that, and we'll see what we can do about getting the recording up as quickly as possible after the meeting.
I think Councillor Garrett's point was to leave it up for a few days. I think that was the point he was making. So we can.
Yeah, I understand, Chair. We will see if we can do that, but I think there is a difference between the meeting as it runs live and the recording that we would have to leave on the website. But please don't ask me to explain, because I think I've just exhausted my technical knowledge. But because there is a whole different process about running a meeting live as it happens and having the recording of the meeting available. But we will see what we can to expedite the second of those.
That's fine. Thank you for that, and thank you for raising it, Councillor Garrett. I wasn't aware of that. Shall we move to the recommendations? I won't read them out. They're available in the paperwork. We're being asked to agree recommendation 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 and 2.4 as amended, and the words of the amendment are on the chat, and I'm sure that committee services have noted them down. Can we agree recommendations 2.1 through to 2.4 as amended? I'm seeing on the chat that people are agreeing. A thumbs up as well from anyone that's...
Sorry, my only question is whether, do we need to formally propose and second that amendment? I don't know. We normally do that.
I'm accepting it as chair. I really hope that we don't need this.
Perfect.
These are recommendations, and we're very happy to adopt it, Councillor Garrett. So unless anyone disagrees with me, and I see no one is, that's fine. We're taking it on board. Thank you for that. So lots of yeses coming in, and that means we have agreed recommendations 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and 2.4 as amended. Thank you, everyone. That brings us to item 7, financial performance 2019-2020, and I'll hand back to Mr. Simpson to introduce the report.
Thank you, Leader. The report provides an update for the committee on the financial position of the council in what seems like a long time ago, the 31st of March 2020. It's important, it may be an obvious thing to say, it's important to see this report in the context of the previous report and the discussion we've just had in terms of the impact on COVID on the council's financials, in terms of our expenditure and income since the 31st of March 2020. So this report doesn't cover any activities after the 31st of March, so only picks up the kind of the first week or so of lockdown, so only had a minimal impact on the council's finances in that year. I'd like to thank the finance team for their work on the annual accounts during a difficult period. The government extended the timescales for our accounts until the end of August, but the team have worked hard to ensure we'll be able to present our accounts to the auditor by the end of June. And the numbers you see in here represent some of the numbers that will go into our annual accounts that the Audit and Governance Committee will look at later in the year. The outcome for the revenue budget is a small underspend of 0.4% of the budget and just over £500,000. This is a similar position that has been reported to this committee throughout the year. The positives of this are the budget that was set back in even longer ago, February 2019, and the savings agreed have been in the main part delivered. The financial management in the council is strong, with accurate reporting throughout the year. No major surprises between when this committee have looked at the financial position. And it's a good baseline to start what will be, probably an understatement, a very difficult financial year in 2020-21. So the details all set out in the report, Leader, and I'm happy with colleagues, officer colleagues, to take any questions on any elements of the report.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. So just for the benefit of the recording, as you've said, this is looking back and is only up to the end of March. Obviously, from the 1st of April, we are in a very different world. Councillor Gordon, you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. And I would like to start by echoing Mr. Simpson's sentiment, and I would like to thank the officers for the Q4 outturn report, and a huge well done to all directorates for their stellar performance and for managing to deliver services during these financially constrained times for the local government. Note that there is a net underspend of £510,000 against an approved financial budget of over £144 million, which means that we have finished this year as expected, and we will not need to use the full 1.1 million from the Council's reserves that was planned at the start of the financial year when the budget was agreed. The positive outturn report clearly indicates that we have good control over our finances. However, we must be very mindful that we are in the middle of a pandemic and the outcome of which is still uncertain. Thank you, Chair. I'll pause there.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. In the middle of a pandemic and about to enter a severe economic recession, all of which is going to make life very difficult for many people. Any questions, any comments on this report? I don't see anyone indicating. It is self-explanatory. And can I just echo Councillor Gordon's comments that it is a good report. It does seem a very long time ago, Mr. Simpson, you're absolutely right, where we were on budget and coming in with a slight underspend. And as the point was made earlier, having a slight underspend and not a huge amount of reserves, but what is recognised to be an adequate amount of reserves will help us in the very many rainy days we have ahead of us. I don't see anyone indicating, so let's move straight to the recommendations. Can we agree recommendations 2.1 through to 2.6? Is that agreed? I'm seeing agreed on the chat. If people want to put thumbs up, that's fine too. No one's agreeing. Excellent. So that's a general consensus. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Mr. Simpson and all the team for your hard work. It really is quite extraordinary. And as I've said many times, and I will continue to say, life isn't going to get any easier. That brings us to item 8. This is the London Cancer Hub update. And I believe, Mr. Simpson, you're having a busy evening. You're going to talk through this report as well.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. So we've got Catherine Carr and Amanda Charrington here as well. So we'll all field questions if they come in, Leader. So the report updates on steps the Council have taken to progress developments at the London Cancer Hub. The Council has continued to work with our partners on the site to help achieve the vision of the site becoming a world-leading campus specialising in cancer research, treatment, education and enterprise. The Council commenced a search for a development partner in September 2019. As the report sets out in paragraph 3.4, the final bidder proposed a model that exposed the Council to significant long-term risk of the rental income and went against our objective of bringing in a development partner to take on the development and occupancy risk. Additionally, since we started out on our procurement, the Council secured 8.4 million from the strategic investment pot to support the delivery of the London Cancer Hub, and specifically to provide infrastructure funding to make the delivery of further phases of the scheme more viable. A big thank you to Catherine and Mandy and the team for securing what was the biggest individual pot of money from the strategic investment pot for any London borough. So 8.4 million was a significant achievement. Given that we received this funding and secured that funding and the pandemic that we've talked about a number of times tonight coming at the same time as we are pausing the procurement, the recommendation in this report are for the Council to use £3 million of this 8.4 million funding to create a new innovation hub of 10,000 square foot space in Cumbrian House, which is in a building the Council owns on the site, alongside the demolition of some redundant buildings to improve visibility and movement around the site, plus a package of works to upgrade the public realm on the site. This removes the need for any further debt and borrowing for the Council, and in my view is the most prudent and effective use of public funding, offering the lowest risk and highest impact in the short and medium term for the Council and for the vision of the Cancer Hub. It will kickstart delivery while allowing the Council to manage risk for the longer term development phases we still have planned. The recommendations have the full support of our professional advisors and our partners, particularly the Institute of Cancer Research on the scheme, who've been fully involved in the evaluation and fully involved in the recommendations in this report. The proposals would allow the Council to continue to work with other landowners on the site to ensure further developments were planned effectively and that we could still achieve our long-term vision. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. And we knew when we started along this journey it was going to be exciting and that we would learn a lot along the way. One of the things that have come up most strongly, I think, is the strength of our partnership along this journey. The work that we're doing with the Institute of Cancer Research, with the Royal Marsden and with the local NHS, our hospital trust, has really helped to cement those relationships and to understand what is possible. So I'm very excited by this, and I know everyone is too. I remember Councillor Crowley kindly publicly stating the support of his group for the project in an event that we held at in the cinema a couple of years ago. And since then, of course, we've had a lot of ministers, we've had the Mayor of London. I believe that Boris Johnson, when he was Mayor of London, came to visit the project, and of course now he's Prime Minister. So there is a lot of high-level support for this, and I was very pleased to see that the work that we've done so far has put us in such a strong place that we were able to, as you say, Mr. Simpson, benefit from a very substantial grant from the SIP fund, which means that we're able to continue this work. We have decided on a slight change of direction. I think it is the right thing to do. It's a response to the market. I think it would be foolish to embark on one way of doing things and not listen to what the market is telling us. So we were already thinking about a slight change of direction, and certainly with the crisis that we're in now, it's clearly the right thing to do. So we certainly aren't reneging on our ambitions, but we're thinking about doing it in a more incremental, gradual way and testing with the market what's possible in these very difficult times. The ethos, the ambition of the project is still there, and I know that we've been contacted via the ICR by very many investors around the world who are showing an interest in what we're doing. The research that I've seen on how the world economy will progress puts life sciences up at the top as one of the main areas in which the economy hopes to rebuild and progress again. So again, I think from that point of view, we are well placed. But I strongly support the recommendation that's come out in this report, and as you say, it's also recommended by our partners, Mr. Simpson, that we need to change direction slightly, adopt a more evolutionary, gradual approach, a more incremental approach, and test out the market carefully as we move forward. I do think attracting startups and entrepreneurs onto the site is absolutely the right way forward. And as everyone knows, we've always said that that shouldn't just be an issue for that part of the borough. We hope to attract those sorts of entrepreneurs and startups into our high street and the space that we're beginning to set up in the retail units that we've acquired on the high street. We don't want the London Cancer Hub to be something happening down in the south of the borough that isn't having an impact on everyone else. We think it will have a positive impact on many people and provide jobs for the future. At the time when we started, we had no idea that we'd be entering a global recession. So now more than ever, we need to think about how we can ensure that our residents have the skills and the opportunities that allow them to do well. I'm particularly excited by the fact that we've built a school on that site and that the Institute of Cancer Research are happy to work with them. I believe that one of their senior members of staff is a governor on their governing body, and they want to do all they can to excite our young people about the opportunities that something that the London Cancer Hub can provide. So yes, I'm pleased that we are not so set in our ways, that we're on one path and refuse to deviate from it. I think it's important that we introduce some flexibility and see how things progress. So that's all from me. If anyone wants to come in at this stage to make any comments or questions, and Councillor Crowley is reminding me that indeed, yes, he was very happy to publicly support the project. I'm not seeing anyone indicating, but I hope someone will want to come in and make a comment, because this is a very exciting project. I see Councillor Pennick and then Councillor Garrett.
Well, thanks very much, Ruth. And I mean, I'm very much more pleased that we're in the driving seat more on this now, and in particular that we're going to have a more flexible space with the Innovation Hub, which I think will lead to a quicker development. It's also very good that we've had this this money from the Strategic Investment Pot, which shows, I think, the interest and the support that we've got from councils across London in developing the Cancer Hub. I think that's really good. But the main point I wanted to make is that in the current situation with the pandemic, I mean, life science is going to be a really important thing for the future. And I'm very pleased that young people who need to be developing skills in areas like this are going to have the opportunity to do this as we go forward. So there's a lot of opportunities here, and I think that the development that we see here in this paper means that the council is much more in the driving seat of where we're going in the short and medium term, and I think that's only for the good.
Thank you for that. I absolutely agree with those comments. Councillor Garrett, you want to come in?
Yes. So a couple of things really. One, I'll get my negative point in first. There we are. That I can end on a positive note. I'm mildly concerned. I realise that the leader has spoken about how this is a change and a new exciting development. Having followed this thing for quite a while now, the concern I have is that this is obviously not the first attempt that we've had to get a development partner. There have been previous attempts which have also failed, not during pandemic, but just during normal times. And so I do have a nagging doubt in my mind about the viability of the whole scheme, which I think is very exciting for all the reasons that Ruth's just mentioned that I won't rehearse. But I'm just slightly worried about whether we're chasing a scheme that doesn't have legs. That's a weird metaphor, isn't it? If we're chasing it without legs, we catch it easily. Whether we're pursuing something that's unlikely to take off on its own, because all of the money that's gone in so far is public money, where in effect, people who know more about this than I do are not agreeing to put their own money in. So that is a slight concern that I have. However, Mr. Simpson was very kind to spend a great deal of time with us over last week about this. So I think I'm satisfied at least that what the plan is at this stage is worth proceeding with. So we look on with optimism, hopefully that it will work. The other concern I always express about this is around the transport infrastructure to support all of the development that's ultimately needed. And so on that point, I think there's some optimism because ward councillors, together with, for example, the local residents association and the neighbourhood development plan, have been looking at all of those possible bits of infrastructure. And the problem has always been that while it's reasonably clear what the problems are and roughly what a solution to them might look like, there's never been any money to do it. And so noting in the paper here that in effect we have about £5.3 million, which is currently available to develop the site and to bring forward infrastructure that can make the whole thing be a success, which is currently not earmarked for any specific purpose. Can I make a request that we do earmark this money, or at least prioritise it for all of those bits of infrastructure around the site that will allow it to be both a success in its own right as a business proposition and also a good neighbour to all of those people who are quite excited to have it next door, but a bit wary about the transport implications of all the people trying to get in and out every day.
Thank you for that, Councillor Garrett. Before I bring in officers, just to clarify, of course, the London Cancer Hub already exists. We're talking about future waves of the development. The fact that we already have the ICR and the Marsden on the site, the fact that the Marsden have already built the Maggie Centre and have other exciting plans for expansion, the fact that the ICR has already built the Centre for Drug Discovery and again have exciting plans for expansion, and we've built the school. Certainly, I'm not saying my ambitions end there by any means whatsoever, but there's no doubt that we are already well placed and that the London Cancer Hub already exists. So the question is, how do we develop it and move forward? And I take on board the points that you've made. Who wants to come in on the issues that Councillor Garrett has raised around the transport infrastructure? Catherine Carr, Amanda Cherrington. I think Catherine Carr is coming in.
Thank you, Chair. I'm aware of Councillor Garrett's questions and concerns about the transport, and was involved in helping Mr. Simpson's briefing last week. And I would confirm that I've already followed up on a couple of those things, and I'm working with Highways to understand current costs, to update costs, particularly around a junction that was mentioned that would unlock the ability for a one-way system to be put in place around the site, which I understand has been an issue for some time, and there's been calls to do that, and it would greatly assist. So I will be costing that up and coming back with an update on that in due course. And the other issues that have been were raised. For members who don't know, we are doing an outline business case for a transport strategy at the site. Through the One Public Estate remaining funding, and that's got a particular focus on what we can do with Belmont Station, twin tracking, and shuttle bus from Sutton Station that would be able to call at Belmont Station as well, with a restated commitment to the Sutton Link tram, but with that specific focus on where we think there's a good chance of getting funding through 1 or 2 routes for the Belmont solutions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Mr. McCoy wants to come in?
Thanks. Sorry, lots of buttons to press. Yeah, I just wanted to come in. I wanted to. I'm glad you emphasised that the cancer hub already is there, always exists, and it's already developing. I think that's a really important point. And I'm actually much happier about this new way forward, with the council being a bit more incremental in the development of this particular part of the project, and because previously it was about looking for someone to help us take it forward. And what we found is that the partners that came forward weren't giving us the offer, weren't going to deliver what we wanted them to deliver. And so I'm happier for us to be a bit more directly involved, working directly with the Institute of Cancer Research, who I remember previous presentations from them advised that this sort of startup, these incubator spaces are what's needed. They've had to look. People are coming around looking for that kind of space, haven't been able to find it locally, or even in the UK sometimes, and had to go abroad. So we know there's a demand, and they've explained how that works. So I feel much more comfortable with this, and I've always felt a bit more comfortable with incremental growth. So I'm really pleased about this. But I think the key thing is this is, especially in light of the issues we think we might face with COVID going forward, with greater unemployment and issues for poverty and inequalities. I think this just is a fantastic opportunity that is too good to waste, to provide such opportunity both for residents and young people. The links to the school and the ICR, what an opportunity for local people, especially when you consider that the intake in that school is someone from the council estate straight over the road. And I've talked personally to a resident who got his son in that school, and he's just so delighted that the opportunities for him. It also will benefit local businesses, including Belmont and the town centre, and also just the supply chains, because these things are built supply chains and this around them. I've been talking to Kingston as well, people in Kingston and businesses in Kingston. They're really excited by it. They've heard about it. They're excited by it. It is a big project. So it's something we should be really proud of. Proud that we're involved in, which is something we should be championing. And when it comes to transport, well, it's an even bigger opportunity for us to lobby hard for the transport support that we need at government level and at London level. This is a massive project that will benefit the whole of the UK. All the work that's going on here. I mean, we're curing cancer, for goodness sake, and I think that's just a really good case to be made for all those transport issues to be addressed, especially if there's going to be an acute hospital going there as well, which is being flagged up as a possibility. So I hope that our colleagues, with their links into various government sources, will join us in making a very, very strong case for the tram and for improved transport links. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCoy. Thank you for those comments. Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, Leader. As you're aware, the Belmont councils have always been firm supporters of the London Cancer Hub project. We work closely with the Institute of Cancer Research and the Royal Marsden and the Maggie Centre to develop their use of the site and help them to make more effective access mechanisms at a low cost. As a Belmont councillor, I was very grateful for the briefing last week on the Cancer Hub, because we actually felt we were being involved. And some of the suggestions we made appear to have been positive. Now, we are happy to work jointly with officers and councillors to make that place a success. We're also happy to offer support with work lobbying the MPs locally to get support for the project. So we will work very closely. We want to work closely, but we're pleased that we are now being involved, because it was a massive project. We seem to be left on the outside. Now we all have a chance to make it develop incrementally and work successfully. I wish it all the success. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. I'm sorry to feel that I hear that you feel you haven't been involved. It has been discussed extensively, both at the Housing, Economy and Business Committee and at this committee. And certainly, you know, in the future, if you need any further briefings, I know that officers will be more than happy to provide them. So don't hesitate to come forward.
Yeah, I think my point is that we made practical solutions they will listen to, which is very helpful. We want that development has to take place in a practical way, which works to make it more attractive to the users of the site and to the residents as well. Thank you.
Absolutely agree with you, Councillor Hicks, and I take on board the need to think about some imaginative solutions for the very serious highway infrastructure issues that there are around there. I must say I'm interested to hear how the two borough MPs, the two Conservative MPs, think that we can cram a brand new acute hospital onto that site as well. From a traffic and parking point of view, I'm surprised that they're so supportive of that project, but also pleased to see that they're taking an interest. And I'll assume, unless you tell me differently, that's the position of your party now. So it's good to see that there are some thoughts going on about how all of that can come together. Councillor Garrett, you wanted to...
I say we've had thoughts about that for many years. We are now pleased to be listened to. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. What was that?
We've had thoughts about how everything could be packed onto that site for many years, since I raised it with the former Chief Executive back in 2012. So
no, absolutely. I'm thinking from a transport highways point of view that certainly having a hospital on that site as well will make it even more complicated. We'll have to see what happens next.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Councillor Garrett, you wanted to come in.
Hello. Yes, I mean, just following on from that point, there was, of course, a very long scrutiny committee meeting, which I think, as leader, you chose not to attend earlier in the year, where we spent the entire evening looking at this question of the new acute care hospital. And if you had been there, or if you listened to the excellent recording, you would know that I spent quite a great deal of energy speaking about the transport issues. So I'm sure you're already aware of that. But just to come back in on the point I made earlier, I think the point about the fact that it is already happening, you're right. And in fact, I was at the planning committee also earlier this year about the massive oak development that the Marston are doing. And every time we go through all of these developments, there's relatively little additional transport infrastructure. And the frustration that we see, and that I want to convey on behalf of our local residents, is that each development that comes forward sort of washes its own face, which is all it's required to do in planning terms. But the overall transport infrastructure, everyone looks to the council to take care of that, including Daniel Oakley's, the chief executive at Epsom at Helier. When I put that to him, I think perhaps, you know, his feeling is that he does hospitals and the council's possibly more involved in transport, and so the frustration is that none of this ever happens. And so we have had a school, as you say, we have had already the Oak Centre or the Maggie Centre, the large expansion at the ICR, and really quite modest transport improvements, some zebra crossings and some extra buses. And that's why I would like to propose an additional recommendation 2.4 on the point that I made earlier, that we agree that the remaining 5.3 million from the strategic investment pot grant yet to be allocated should be prioritised for transport infrastructure in line with a strategic transport plan for the whole site. So I can type that up on the chat if people wish, but that's an additional recommendation. I think setting some commitment that beyond merely talking about things and saying how wonderful they might be, that we're making a really tangible commitment with the cash that we have to spend it on this transport infrastructure that we all agree is needed.
Before you type it up, Councillor Garrett, I'm going to suggest to you that ring fencing the funding at this stage I don't think is a good idea. We all recognise the importance of improving the infrastructure. We need to see how successful our lobbying is with the GLA and how it goes forward. So I'm happy to include a recommendation that we look into how we can allocate funding to the transport improvements, but to actually ring fence a sum of money at this stage, I don't think it's prudent. It's I
agree with that, which is why I used the word prioritised rather than ring-fenced. I think you're quite correct that it would be a mistake to ring-fence it by prioritising, and I'm happy to, if there's a better word than prioritise. What I mean by that word is that should be the first priority that we wish to achieve, because obviously the purpose of this grant is to try to bring forward this site, get it to a point where it is ready for prime investment. And I think one of the issues that will immediately come up with any developer that looks at it, they're obviously going to see the same transport issues that we can all see. And so if we've got some of that cash either already spent or in the pipeline to deal with these issues, I think it would be a real show of good faith for residents, but I think it would also be a very strong statement to any future partner. So I'm happy to debate the word prioritised. I agree with you about ring-fenced, but I think we should find some form of words that says that the 5.3 million we have, we ought to try to find a way to spend it on the transport infrastructure problem that we agree we need to tackle.
So I'm going to ask our Chief Executive, Helen Bailey, to think about a form of words that certainly evidences our strong need to find solutions to this problem. I agree with you, ring fencing isn't the same as prioritising, but prioritising is also raising expectations about that particular pot of money. I do hope that if we can work together on this joint lobbying, we'll actually have a lot more money than that through the GLA in order to ensure that this project is a success. Because as you say quite rightly, Councillor Garrett, we do need to provide some solutions to the highways infrastructure if we're going to attract the sort of investment that we want. So I'm going to look to Helen Bailey to see if she can come up with the words, because I'm more than happy to evidence the need to make highways improvements. I'm just a little bit worried about identifying the pot of money that it's going to come from. Ms. Bailey, can you help?
So, Chair, would it help, given the intervention from Catherine earlier on in the meeting, to simply add a recommendation requiring us to bring forward further information on the transport provision around the site at the earliest possible opportunity? I think that picks up the prioritisation that Councillor Garrett was asking for without committing us to a particular sum of money, which I think was your point, Chair, that it would be unwise to do so. But in any event, we do need to come back on the transport issues as and when we're clear about, as and when we've got the next stage underway of the proceedings here.
So you said bring forward further information about the transport improvements and add on possible funding sources?
Certainly can do, yes.
I do think Councillor Garrett's point about how we're going to pay for this is really important. I just don't want, first of all, to give the impression to the GLA that we're able to fund this themselves, because obviously we're not. So let's see if we can bring forward, what I do suggest is that there's going to be a lot of dialogue going forward. This certainly isn't the end of the conversation. So do you want to read that out again, Helen, with something around funding allocation included?
So I think what we're saying is to bring forward a further report on the transport issues on the site, together with the financial, together with the sources of finance available.
So I'd suggest, together with potential sources of finance,
okay.
that we can explore all avenues. Councillor Garrett, you happy with that?
Yes, I'm happy with that. Actually, though, you give me another idea, which is on recommendation 2.2. Could we add to the end of that, consulting with ward councillors and local residents and residents associations in drawing up the plans? Because I think you're quite right that we obviously do want a collaborative approach. And I think Councillor Hicks' point earlier, that there's a sense that this thing just sort of trundles away without anyone really knowing what's going on. I think every time, as Councillor Hicks says, every time we've actually sat down and had a discussion about practicalities, it's been really fruitful. And so I think it would be worth putting into the recommendation that we should do more of that. And I know the local residents association, in actual fact, I don't think they would call it a shopping list, but they have a shopping list of things that they would like to go into that transport infrastructure plan, and I think it'd be very sensible to speak to them as well. So if we could add to the end of recommendation 2.2, so leaving it as it is and then just adding at the end, consulting with ward councillors, local residents and residents associations in drawing up the plans. If that's reasonable enough.
No, it absolutely is. I'm just puzzled, Councillor Garrett, because I know that huge efforts have been made to talk to the allotment holders, to the residents associations, that officers have attended public meetings. So I'm surprised and a little disappointed that people feel they haven't been included, because there's been a huge amount of community engagement along the way. Always happy to do more, obviously, but I can see officers present here this evening who have been directly involved in that. So I'm going to suggest that we add on to the end of 2.2 in collaboration. So it's not, consultation is quite limited. I think collaboration is a way of working. So in collaboration with ward councils, local residents and local residents associations, which to be honest has been our practice all along. I know that Amanda Cherrington, for example, has attended many meetings and learnt more about allotments than she ever knew before. So there's been a lot of engagement with local residents, but always happy to do more. So So Councillor McCoy is saying it should be in 2.3 instead of 2.2. Let me look at the words.
So the reason I suggested, I mean, she may be right. Sorry, I think my mic's still on. The reason I suggested 2.2 is that 2.2 talks about deliver the next phase of development at the London Cancer Hub, including demolition and public realm works on site and construction works to convert Cumbrian House into an innovation hub. We spoke at length in the briefing session we just mentioned earlier. We spoke at length about that, and those plans are at quite an early stage. And I think the fear is that they suddenly pop out at a fully complete stage, ready to go to planning committee, at which point it becomes a sort of binary yes no. And I think it'd be very useful if we could get involved in actually, co-creating those as it goes along. So that was my thought, and that was the reason I suggested 2.2 rather than 2.3.
And it doesn't work for me in 2.3 because that's quite specific about approve the ceiling of the SIP grant agreement. So I don't think it works there. I think we can tack it on to the end of 2.2. I mean, we are talking about the next phase of development. As I say, to be honest, I've taken it for granted given the scale of the community engagement up until now, but I don't see, unless you disagree with me, Ms. Bailey, I don't see any problem adding on 2.2 in collaboration with ward councils, local residents and local residents associations.
No, Chair, I don't see any problem. One of the constraints, though, of this model of working is that I can't necessarily look into the eyes of my colleagues and check that they're happy to. Mrs. Simpson.
You've muted yourself, Helen.
Yes, sorry. No, that's fine, Chair.
Okay, in which case, let me just check the chat because there's some words up there. Okay, so the suggestion is that we take 4 recommendations. Recommendation 2.1 to approve the direct delivery of the next phase of development at the London Cancer Hub as detailed in the report. Recommendation 2.2, the words already in the report, ending with to convert Cumbrian House into an innovation hub and adding in the words in collaboration with the ward councils, local residents and local resident associations. To approve 2.3 and then to add in an extra recommendation 2.4 to bring forward further report about the transport issues together with potential sources of finance. Can we agree those 4 recommendations? Is everyone happy? Yep, people are indicating on the chat that they agree and no one is disagreeing. So we're agreeing 2.1 through to 2.4. 2.2 has some extra words added to it and the new recommendation 2.4. Thank you, everyone. And I think it's important we spend a bit of time on this. We need to get it right. As everyone has agreed, it is a very exciting project and bodes well for the future and future opportunities for everyone living in our borough. That brings us to the final item this evening, item 9, Education Update Report, Written Statement of Action, and I'm pleased to see we've been joined by Fiona Phelps. Could I ask people who have spoken recently if you could mute your microphones, please, and Fiona, hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I suppose I should start by saying to those people who've been at People Committee in the past, you'll be very glad to know, as this is the last item, that this is a relatively short presentation from me, unlike most of my other ones. So this was about an event that happened 3 weeks before the COVID lockdown. So it feels like many, many months ago, but it is a really important change in our culture in education. As some of you here will be very, very familiar with, in January 2017, there was a local area inspection of our SEND services, our special educational needs and disability services. It's far wider than just the council. It does involve health, it does involve schools and education settings. It is literally looking at the local area and the implementation of the Children and Families Act 2014.
Fiona, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
But
no, it's quite right.
Luckily, and I've also seen that a few people are coming in and out. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Could I ask everyone not just to mute, but also to turn off the cameras? I think that might help with the bandwidth. Sorry, Fiona, do carry on.
That's right. So we had 3 areas of weakness. We had a lack of coherence and joint working between local area leaders, agencies and schools, which was resulting in poor communication, inconsistent opportunities for social inclusion, and a high number of exclusions, especially at primary school level. Our second area of weakness was a poor oversight and quality and impact of EHC, which is Education, Health and Care plans, in meeting the needs of children and young people. And our third area of weakness was an inequality of opportunity for families, which arose from a serious decline in the availability of an effective independent advice service in Sutton. So these are all very serious weaknesses. As a result, we co-produced a written statement of action, which was actually quite an impressive tome by the time we completed it. It had 27 actions, all with a range of sub-actions and underlying work below all of those. HMI, Her Majesty's Inspectors, who were the original inspectors, were pleased with our written statement of action. They said it provided a comprehensible framework which identified relevant actions taken as well as the 27 proposed future actions. And they particularly liked that we had understood the issues, considered all the actions carefully and thoroughly, and were ensuring that measures of success were mainly focused on impact. Impact was the key issue. We were not interested in output, just doing things, but actually making a difference for our children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities. So usually after 18 months of a written statement of action, you are revisited, as they call it. It's actually a re-inspection by any other name, but we call it a revisit. Ours actually took place a little over 2 years later, between the 2nd and 4th of March 2020. The purpose of a revisit is solely to decide whether or not the local area has made sufficient progress. That is the only criterion, sufficient progress in addressing each area of serious weakness as detailed in the original inspection report. I have to say it was a very challenging 3 days. HMI and the Care Quality Commission both come to inspect, and they are definitely not there to make friends with you. They are there to inspect the progress. So they met with parents and professionals from across the local area, leaders from educational settings, children, young people. They went to a number of schools. They met with health colleagues. They looked at all of our data. They cross-referenced it. They triangulated it. And they interrogated us. We started each day with a keep in touch session, which was really an opportunity for the inspectors to grill us, frankly, every day at 8:30, and we met with them several times during the 3 days. We also had a senior inspector overseeing all the work, so there really was no escape. However, the really good news is that we have indeed made sufficient progress in all 3 areas of our written statement of action, and we no longer need any scrutiny or support from the DFE or NHS England. So I should also say that this is quite a good outcome, not only in itself, but also because over half of the areas of weakness found in other boroughs do not make sufficient progress. So the fact that we made sufficient progress on all 3 of our areas is a real commendation to the local area. And I do think the way that services, teams, schools, settings and leaders have embraced the changes needed and embedded them in their practice is really to be commended. So overall, the inspectors identified that leaders, which is from all services, the health and social care and education, leaders have secured the confidence and support of the school settings. There has been a seismic shift in this area. Those of you who have been involved in education for any length of time will know that this was a fairly critical issue in our local area, that schools and the local authority and other services were not joined up, were not working together. Whereas now, and I love this quote, there has been a seismic shift in that, and we are now working very well together. Health professionals are also far more visible and playing a much more significant part in addressing the weaknesses identified at the initial inspection, and really working much more effectively with education and with social care to support children holistically. One nice thing that came out of that was that children and young people feel confident when making choices about future training and careers, and they appreciate the guidance that their schools give them in developing skills which can support their social participation and independence. So we are really working to prepare our young people for adulthood, which is absolutely vital. We have reduced the number of exclusions. We will continue to focus on that. We have done that through supporting schools to meet needs more effectively and sooner. Parents are more confident, they are engaging with us more, and generally supporting the work that we are doing, and we are able then to support them more effectively too. Leaders have a secure oversight of plans now, education, health and care plans, and we are providing the plans to the right children. So there was a great deal of strength there now, which is, again, in comparison to January 2018, it really is a very significant change. We do fully acknowledge that not everyone can see the changes that the inspectors saw, and we do need to continue to support parents to ensure their confidence increases throughout the local area. And we do need to continue to focus on ensuring constructive working relationships that will allow work that is in the best interests of children and young people to continue. So we are going to continue with our improvement for special educational needs and disabilities. We have our continuous improvement plan. We are focusing going forward on increasing our co-production with parents and with young people, improving outcomes for all vulnerable young people, and ensuring an effective preparation for adulthood. We want to increase the inclusion and or reduce the exclusions of children and young people at SDN support, not those with EHC plans. We have addressed that, so we will continue to work on that. But those who do not have a plan, who do not need a plan, but do have some special education needs. We also want to continue to develop the local offer website so it becomes a really dynamic and live place for parents, families and young people to access the support and information that they need. And we also want to work on joint commissioning, again, making sure that health, social care and education are working together to commission the services that are required. We have a great deal of work arising from the High Needs Block Review, which has been the subject of previous People Committee reports. That is ongoing. It is an incredibly large piece of work, but it's really exciting and really, really good. We're also focusing on ensuring continuous professional development for colleagues, again, throughout the local area, and also focusing on quality assurance, making sure that nothing we have done so far slips, but that our standards continue to rise. And finally, I'd just like to echo the words that have already been said regarding the partnership work between Sutton, Cognos and Health Services, together with parents, schools and settings, and the other key organisations. This has developed and strengthened over the past 2 years and has really shown its strength during this COVID situation. Everyone has gone many extra miles to support our children, and I am really grateful. So I will just end by saying thank you all for the support and challenge, and there's been plenty of both, that you have given to all the services that are working with education over the past 2 years, and I really hope that our progress can continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona, for that. Thank you for that comprehensive summary of the work that has been done and the huge amount of work that's gone into it, the improvements that we recognise needed to be made, many of which have been achieved, but also you gave a real sense of our ambitions going forward, and I think that's important. Nick Island, Strategic Director of People, that's Adults and Children. You want to come in at this stage, and then I'll pass over to Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. And just a few points for me. So whilst Fiona has talked a great deal about the process over the last couple of years and the huge amount of work, I think perhaps a few high-level points. So first of all, primarily what Fiona's focused on is, in answer to the exam question, have we responded effectively to the inspection result of January 2018? And yes, we have in all 3 areas, and we have made sufficient progress. So I think that's great news in itself. But I think the more important point is that whilst we've been doing that, we have supported greater outcomes and achievements for children and young people, which is primarily what we're here for. We are in the business of supporting children, young people and adults, and we have shown that with working with the local area, we've been able to ensure that there are better outcomes now for children and young people. And that's, I think, the most important thing, and something we are really proud of. I think the third issue is that we've been able to do that as a local area, and as Fiona rightfully points out, there's been huge amounts of effort and work to develop our partnerships over the last 2 years, and I think that's held us in really good stead. Thinking about the first item of this evening and our response to COVID, the fact that we have an education leadership group, the fact that we are able to work effectively and efficiently and in great collaboration with our head teachers and schools has meant that we've had a really robust and effective response to supporting vulnerable children, children with social workers and children with EHCPs, and how they've been able to access school and support during this period. And then the final thing is that we've done that through co-production with all our partners and with parents, and we remain committed to doing that over the near future in light of our continuous improvement plan. So I endorse everything that Fiona has said, and I think we should be very proud of the achievements that Fiona has led on with our local area. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you for expressing that commitment so well. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. Well, of course, I'm really pleased that Ofsted and the CQC have recognised the work that's gone on in the past 2 years. And I will say that it's been incredible, the amount of work that has gone on. And those of us who've sat on the People Committee, you know, will know just how much work has been done. Both Nick and Fiona mentioned our partners, and of course we couldn't have done it without the partners. So, you know, Cognos and all the council officers, all our other partners, Sutton Parents Forum. But I do just want to say that Fiona obviously has been a key lead in all of that. And quite rightly, she says that there have been many challenges. And there have been lots of challenges, and I have to say all of those challenges, you know, they have been taken on board, and people have worked incredibly hard to address those challenges. I think all I want to say is that we've always said that we were on an improvement journey. We've said that right from the beginning. And this isn't a time for us to be complacent, because that journey will continue. We know that there are still some areas, you know, for us to really get our heads around, and that will happen. I'm really confident, having worked, you know, having sort of lived and breathed this for the last 2 years. I am confident that as we go forward, that we will continue to ensure that all services for children with SEND will, you know, we'll ensure that we do our best for them and make sure that they get the right support and the support that they need. So yeah, I just want to end by saying a huge thank you. The revisit, which was an inspection, was very intensive. And I'm really pleased that the officers from both Ofsted and the CQC recognised all the hard work that's gone into it, and the partnership working. So yeah, huge thank you to everyone who has brought us here to this point. Thanks ever so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor James. And I'm glad to see that you two are thinking ahead to the future. We need to recognise the work that's been done, but I'm really pleased to see that everyone is saying that there's still a lot of work to do. And as we go forward, we need to ensure that all the children living in our borough have the opportunities to do well. I've got Councillor Drummond who wants to come in, and then Councillor Batt.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear
yes,
me?
That's fine. Yes, that's fine.
Brilliant. Sorry, I have contact. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Councillor James, and I'm pleased that you say this isn't the time to be complacent, because you know, for me, this is almost at the starting point of the journey, because we should be looking for excellence in that. And I think we are where we are now, and we should move on, and that's where we should be going. So I know, Fiona, you were talking about sort of continuing with the improvements. So I was very pleased to hear that. Just one area I'd like to focus on very quickly. On 4.5.5, I think it is, of the report, we talk about improving level of engagement and buy-in from parents, which you referenced, Fiona. Then at 4.10, we talk about ensuring there's increased confidence with the parents. When you look at the letter on page 76, the last paragraph, and more importantly, the last sentence of that paragraph, it seems it's a little bit stronger than improving confidence and sort of improving levels of engagement. They say there's a need to find a way to re-establish the trust and confidence of parents and parents groups. So do we acknowledge that that is a real area of a really problematic area, and it's a little bit more important than just increasing the level of confidence? We actually have to rebuild and do perhaps more there than just sufficient progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Fiona, do you want to come in on that point?
Yes, we do absolutely agree that we can never work hard enough with parents and with young people. It is absolutely essential that we work together, that we are working together in the best interests of children and young people. So yeah, we completely agree. It is part of our SEND improvement plan to improve and increase our co-production and joint working, and indeed our confidence, or parents' confidence in the services across the local area. So yes, thank you, Councillor Drummond.
Good. I look forward to hearing kind of the plans and how we're going to do that in greater detail. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I'm happy to bring in Councillor Batt. I know you've been working very closely with many of the families, Councillor Batt.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to echo both Councillor James' comments and acknowledge Councillor Drummond's comments about the rebuilding trust with parents and carers and parents groups. I'm absolutely committed to making sure that happens. It's so important that we continue to listen to parents, we continue to work together with them to ensure that our children and young people have the right support and right help when they need it to enable them to reach their full potential. You say I've worked closely with the Parents Forum, and I speak to many parents and carers, to make sure we listen and that we actually act on what they're saying to us as well, not just listen, but actively listen. We also need to listen to our children and young people as well. We need to make sure their voice is heard as part of this process. And as Fiona sort of mentioned, we are doing a lot of work around preparing for adulthood, and it's a really, really key piece of work that we have to work with young people and parents together to drive that forward. But as everyone said, we are on an improvement journey. This is by no means the end. This is a continuous process, and I'm committed to driving that forward and bringing parents, carers, and children and young people along with us.
Thank you, Councillor Batt, and I know we'd all share that commitment. Before we move to the recommendation, can I just thank you, Fiona, and your team for the huge amount of work that's gone into this. We recognise that there was a lot of work to do, a lot of improvement to be made, and we're certainly going along the right lines on this journey. I recognise that there are some parents who still feel that we need to work better in the way in which we consult and work with them, although I know it's also true that many parents are really benefiting from the services that we offer and are getting a good service. So it's important that we work well with everyone, and it's important we recognise what the work that's left still to do. So thank you for everything that you are doing. Councillor Garrett, you wanted to come in with a final question?
Yes, just a sort of retrospective question, really. Going back to February, we obviously had a big discussion in this committee, which I think was the last time we physically met, actually, about the whole question around Cognus. And there was a big row, as you'll recall at the time, I'm sure, about whether it should or shouldn't be brought back in-house. We, as the opposition, felt that that was an unnecessary sort of bit of admin. The administration's view was that it was a necessary step to reform. I just wondered where we are with that now.
And I suggest, Councillor Garrett, that's a conversation for another day. It's complex. We need to come back to you with some of our early thoughts about where we're going to go next. But I suggest that at the end of a long meeting, setting up a completely new issue is not the right time.
So it isn't happening? It is happening? My understanding is that it was agreed that it should happen, but then it now isn't happening. Is that correct?
But when you say it, what do you mean by it?
Well, I'm looking at the papers here from February. This committee resolved point 2, the necessary action to change the status of Cognis to a wholly owned local authority trading company for the financial year 2020-21 be taken. And my understanding is that that hasn't happened. So I was just curious what is happening.
Absolutely. Who wants to come in? Mr. Ireland, Ms. Bailey, who wants to come in on that?
Yes, I can come in, Chair. So we were in the process when COVID joined us, if I can put it that way, and clearly the efforts of officers, particularly in education and Cognis, have been focused in other areas. So as our Chief Exec alluded to earlier, we are now starting to think about and focus a little bit more on business as usual. So we will be looking to recommence the process.
Okay, so watch this space and we expect further updates as time goes forward. That brings us to the recommendation. We're asked to note the outcome of the recent revisit. Can we agree that? We're noting. Everyone is agreeing. That's absolutely fine.
Agreed.
Thank you again, Fiona, for everything that you're doing. As this meeting comes to an end, I'd just like to notice the fact that almost everything that we've talked about has been very much around partnership and the importance of partnership as a local authority and for the way that we're working and going to be working as we go forward. We've said over and over again, it's our partnership working with the voluntary sector, the NHS, with our local businesses, with our schools, with our communities, with our housing associations, with our residents. It's absolutely vital to ensure that during these incredibly difficult times, both the health pandemic and the ensuing global financial downturn, if not recession there's going to be, it's really important that we work well within those partnerships. I know that many, the voluntary sector, the local hospital trust, have said openly and publicly that they're absolutely delighted with the way that partnership works in this borough. I'm not saying it's perfect and I'm not saying we can't improve, but I do think that we have a good foundation to build on as we go forward. So can I thank everyone on this committee for their hard work? Can I thank all of the teams behind you who are doing so much work to ensure that we provide the best possible opportunities for the residents living in our borough. On behalf of all of us, we'd like to thank all of you. We're doing some good work, but there are some very, very difficult times ahead, and we have to ensure that people are given as much support as we possibly can through these difficult times. On that basis, thank you everyone for your hard work. It's been a very good meeting and I wish you well. Good evening. Goodbye.